Karen Armstrong writes that it is only in the context of a kinder attitude toward ourselves that we can consider the importance of transcending the ego. It is only in the context of declaring ourselves good enough that we can set aside our own egos in true service to the highest purpose for our lives. When we finally discover the beauty in the good enough, we can let go and be led by a wisdom larger than that which can be recognized by our unawakened self. Most world religions ask that we transcend the ego. Christianity has the concept of kenosis, or emptying. Buddhists teach a doctrine of no self. The Vedas teach that our true identity is the higher self, not the self we identify with our individual egos. The Tao tells us the master doesn't talk, he acts. When his work is done, the people say, "Amazing. We did it all by ourselves." This is not exactly what most of us are striving for. Most of us are striving for recognition. We may not need the adoration of the people, but we certainly need the recognition that we get when we see results. How else do we know that our work has made a difference? We expect our work to make a difference. We expect to see results. We strive to leave our mark on our children, on our families, on our workplace, and on our communities. One of my life's defining moments came after a particularly rough patch, when I remarked to a friend that I hoped that she had noticed how much I had changed. She had, she replied, because she had grown and changed too. She had grown because I had grown. I had made a difference in her life. Most of us cling to these life-defining moments, carrying the expectations into the next relationship, the next job, the next volunteer project. This is the ego that is grasping and clinging to expectations. This is the ego that we are encouraged to let go. This is the self that gains strength in separation and unity in letting go. In the words of Buddhist Joseph Goldstein, in order to give up the ego, you first need to develop one. Developing an ego is known as differentiation of self in family systems theory. The less developed a person's self or ego is, that person is more susceptible to groupthink. You see this in adolescents who gain their identity from a certain group, a clique, a way of dressing, a kind of music that they listen to. Now, you might think that your teen is rebelling against you when they go out that front door wearing yet another thing that you told them not to wear. But this is only partially due to their need to become a separate self, to separate from the family. It's actually primarily due to their overwhelming need to fit in, to be like others, to gain approval from the group. Healthy development means that the ego eventually moves on from this stage to a more independent stage. The self no longer needs acceptance from others to feel secure. The ego no longer needs to bully others into agreement in order to justify its existence. A person with a well-differentiated self takes risks. A person with a strongly developed ego can make decisions from a selfless place, neither succumbing to the pressure of the group nor forcing the group into a decision. In the words of the Tao, things arise and the master lets them come. Things disappear and she lets them go. She has but doesn't possess, acts but doesn't expect. When our spiritual journeys mirror our human developmental journeys, we move from the magical thinking of a child who believes everything her parent tells her to. We move from that magical thinking into a mature faith, a mature universalizing faith of the adult who recognizes that all life, all truth, is one. It can be dangerous to set aside our egos before we have developed a strong one. You see this when people join cults and when they're damaged by New Age gurus. The poorly differentiated self is preyed on by perpetrators and sociopaths, bullies and tyrants. We can get stuck along the way on our journeys towards ego strength, on our journeys from magical thinking to this profound truth. I had another friend who, as a teenager, wrecked his parents' truck in a bit of foolishness that involved a muddy field and a late-night celebration after a football game. As an adult, he finally confronted his feelings of guilt and asked for his parents' forgiveness. This is what his mother said. "I haven't thought about that incident in years. Don't you think it's about time you left that behind and came home from that muddy field for good?" We all have places that we stay in our heads, reliving over and over the disappointments from the past. The healthy self comes home from the muddy field, from the broken relationship, from the rejected application, from so much, and gets ready for freedom. Every society, every family, every workplace, and yes, every congregation has well-differentiated people, poorly differentiated people, and most people in between. In between this sort of magical thinking, repeating what the parent has taught you, and in between this understanding of this profound, mystical truth. As people on a spiritual path, we are called to recognize exactly where we are on that path and engage in practices that benefit our fellow travelers. We are called to transcend our egos. Joseph Goldstein understands that people are often puzzled, even frightened, by the concept of anatta, or no self, thinking that if there is no self, then the unique I will just disappear. But deeply understanding no self is the great jewel of the Buddhist teaching, he writes. It is the heart of a free mind. A Sri Lankan monk once expressed it succinctly. No self, no problem. This realization can be freeing, But we get stuck here too, thinking this means that we will never have problems ever again. The weak ego gets pulled back into suffering and self-preoccupation. We can get back on the path by, as Goldstein recommends, juggling the two distinct meanings of the word self. Western psychology's differentiated self and the Buddha's no self. There is no self stuck in the mud, re-experiencing everything that we think has created the I of who we are. There is no static sum of all of our experiences. Life is a process of becoming. Things arise, and she lets them come. Things disappear, and she lets them go. In Christian theology, kenosis is the self-emptying of one's own will and becoming entirely receptive to God's divine will. For many, this can be as puzzling and as frightening a concept as the Buddha's no self. Kenosis is an especially difficult concept for non-theists to grasp. Kenosis and anatta are similar concepts. We have to be careful because with both concepts we can get trapped in our own sense of unworthiness. Christians can get stuck in a sense of their own sinfulness, reinforcing their separation from the divine, reinforcing supernatural ideas of God as the divine parent who deliberately bestows blessings and just as impulsively withdraws blessings. Non-theists have their own getting stuck. They can get stuck in a sense of being all-powerful, of not needing that supernatural parent. All of us, theist, non-theist, and those in between, can get stuck in negative emotion. We think that having compassionate concern for others means self-sacrifice. The weak, undifferentiated ego empties itself into despair. We get stuck in the mud of who we think we are. By emptying ourselves of egotism, we open ourselves to the possibility of a divine love that knows no limits. By opening to the emptiness of self, to this concept of no self, we awaken to our potential for compassion, even for ourselves. First, we develop a healthy ego, and then we let it go. Our Unitarian tradition carries the echoes of Vedanta, the Hindu philosophy that affirms our true identity as the transcendent higher self, which is not separate from ultimate reality. A prevailing assertion from Vedanta is that we identify with our individual egos and fail to see this truth, fail to see our unity with this truth, with the divine. Early translations of the Vedas, the world's oldest sacred texts, came from India to America in the early 19th century, influencing such luminaries as Jefferson, Adams, Emerson, Thoreau, and Walt Whitman. Author Philip Goldberg writes that Emerson's essay, Nature, proclaims that the individual soul and the universal spirit, which he later names the Oversoul, were one, a direct echo of Vedanta's Atman is Brahman. He backed the claim with his own transcendent experience. Emerson's transcendent experience was his own emptying of what he called mean egotism. And when he emptied himself of mean egotism, he felt a sense of unity with the divine, with ultimate reality, universal spirit, what he called the Oversoul. Now, we do not have to be mystics to understand the importance of transcending the ego. We can live as though the self does not exist and begin to inhabit a world that is larger than the boundaries of our own skin. We do not have to sit in meditation for hours, waiting for a unitive experience of the universal spirit. We can live with an awareness of how we greedily grasp at what we think belongs to us, holding firmly to who we think we are, attaching ourselves to objects of desire that separate us from true connection. In Ethics for a New Millennium, the Dalai Lama writes, "My call for a spiritual revolution is not a call for a religious revolution, nor is it a reference to a way of life that is somehow otherworldly, still less to something magical or mysterious. Rather, it is a call for a radical reorientation away from our habitual preoccupation with self." You build a strong ego structure by becoming aware of all aspects of your personality, even the parts of yourself you do not like. Embracing all of who you are, you engage the third step to a compassionate life, compassion for yourself. Compassion for yourself does not mean controlling how you feel, making sure you never have another negative emotion ever again. Compassion for yourself means you no longer get stuck in negative emotions. You no longer get stuck in the mud of the past. By emptying ourselves of egotism, we open ourselves to the possibility of a divine love that knows no limits. By opening to the emptiness of self, to this concept of no self, we awaken to our potential for compassion for all, even for ourselves. First, we develop a healthy ego. Then we let it go. May it be so, and amen.
We are the Caneo Valley Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. Our mission is to nurture spiritually courageous people who transform the world through justice and compassion. Like us on Facebook, check out our website at cvuuf.org, or come visit us. See you soon!